What's up, guys? This is Coach Grant with First Down Training, and today we're going to be breaking down a great wide receiver football IQ quiz to test your knowledge of the position. So I hope this video helps you guys out. Hope it could teach you a few new things. But also, fellas, if you are a wide receiver and would like 200 plus wide receiver drills, all broken down into categories for you guys to learn from, check out that very first link in the description below where you can get access to our 200 plus drills specifically for wide receivers and QBs. These are some of the categories that we'll have them broken into: wide receiver routes, releases, catching, the works. So everything you need to know about the wide receiver position, again, very first link in that description below. If you'd like to get access, fellas, let's get started with this video. So if you're not familiar with our quiz style videos, what this video is going to be like is I'm going to show you guys a pre-snap look, whether it's, a coverage like this, whether it's a DB look. I'm going to ask you a series of questions about the look, and then I'm going to give you a chance to pause the video, think about your answer, and then we'll break it down, okay? So first example here, how would you guys run if you were the number one wide receiver and you were facing this specific coverage from a DB? How would you guys run a deep post? So I'm talking like a post that's probably 15 yards downfield. How would you guys run a deep post versus this type of look from a DB? Okay, so you guys can go ahead and pause the video and think about your answers. So pause the video. All right, let's break this thing down. So you guys every time you come up to the line, part of the reason that we make these types of videos is to get wide receivers in tune with their pre-snap process. So what's a pre-snap process? Pre-snap process is something that every wide receiver needs to think about on every rep. You're trying to look for three specific things on a DB. Number one, we have to look for his leverage. Number two, we have to look for how close or how far he is from me. And then number three, we have to look at the coverage. So those three things can determine how I would run my route, right? So if he's inside shade press and he's man-to-man coverage, that would make me run the route differently if he was lined up like this. Outside shade, looks like it's zone coverage about 8 yards away, right? So that's what we identify. He's outside shade, his eyes are to the inside, he's about 8 yards away from me, zone coverage automatically. So if you had to run a deep post, you got to think, why would a DB ever be playing outside leverage? What's his goal with outside leverage? Obviously, he doesn't want to give up the outside route, so he doesn't want to let you run an out route, a comeback, a fade. He wants to force everything to the inside. Why? Because he has help to the inside, aka safety help. So if you were running a deep post and you guys said angle your stem to the outside and attack his leverage, or maybe attack the blind spot, that would be 100% correct. If you guys said just run at his inside shoulder, that would be wrong. So we're going to see why this works. So I'm going to play this full speed. I want you to pay attention to this wide receiver here. So you see how he comes off the ball, attacks the DB's leverage, it widens him, and then you see how much more space he has over the top. Now, schematically, like based on the scheme of the play, this also works because he gets out of the safety's line of vision. This play right here, and this is why it's good for wide receivers to understand plays as well, because this play is they have this obviously like tight formation, reduced split. They're going deep post, and then they're having this slot wide receiver run this dig. So he takes this wide stem, which also attacks the DB's leverage, but it gets him out of the safety's line of vision. And when this guy cuts and cross in front of his face, he drives on the dig, opening up this deep post shot over the top. So we have to make sure, fellas, that anytime we have an outside shade look and the route is away from the leverage, you still want to attack the leverage. So let's play this thing full speed again. Just because it's zone does not mean that we just take off and go run. The same route running principles versus different leverage looks still apply. So now, second look here, I want to ask you a question that's a little bit unique. We don't normally cover this type of stuff on our quiz videos, but this specific look, we got a DB here. This is obviously the 5-yard line going in. DB's on the goal line. I want to ask you, what are DBs taught not to do in this situation? So what are DBs? Because again, as a wide receiver, you have to understand your opponent almost just as well as you understand the wide receiver position, right? That's why that chess match of wide receiver versus DB will go on and on and on until the end of time, because DBs want to understand what wide receivers are thinking. Wide receivers want to understand what DBs are thinking. So in this situation, red zone, DB is lined up on the goal line. What are DBs taught never to do? So you guys go ahead and pause the video and think about your answers. So pause the video. All right, let's break this thing down. So think about the situation here. This DB, as a wide receiver, what are we in the goal line, right? Like we're probably On every route, right? Whether it's a slant, whether it's a dig, we're trying to sell what? We're trying to make the DB think we're doing what? We're doing a fade, right? So if we're on the 50-yard line, you can make a DB think you're running a fade by doing a number of things, but most importantly, running hard, running in full speed, keeping good body language, and attacking, right? On the goal line, that doesn't really work because if you take off at his outside shoulder running full speed, he's probably going to stay patient because he's just going to let you run. You're going to run out the back of the end zone. He's going to stay patient, stay right on your inside hip. So a DB is taught to never backpedal on the goal line. So if that's what you guys were thinking, that would be correct. So he is taught to never backpedal. So that's the reason why, right? Like if you take off full speed and you go attack, like what he's probably just trying to sell you on a route. So just sit to the inside. Don't open up too quick. Now, another thing is if this wide receiver, because watch what Garrett Wilson does. You see how he attacks this DB, but he sits. Imagine if he started to backpedal. What would that open up easily? The slant. That would be money. All day long, we could throw that slant because in the goal line, everything's tighter. Quarterback knows to put the ball. It's got to be on point with the ball. He's got to get it out of his hands fast. So if he backs up and he even gives you a step, that's an easy throw for that quarterback. And you see a lot of DBs do this. They will backpedal on the goal line. No need to backpedal. They should stay patient and sit. So as a wide receiver, how can I use that knowledge to my advantage? So think about it. If you have to run a route, like Garrett Wilson's running a fade, right? And he comes up and he gives this great release to the inside and he's able to get a lot of separation to the outside. We know that when he's not going to backpedal, we know that with my release, I don't want to get too close to where he could get an easy jam and get hands. I want to leave some space, but not too much space, right? Because I think everybody can agree if you're running a back pylon quick fade in this situation, you obviously don't want to just take off and go run. Because a DB in inside shade, his responsibility is still the same. Get hands, squeeze to the sideline, protect the inside. But when it's the goal line, we know he ain't going to move. So when we close the space and attack him, we want to leave some kind of space. See how Wilson maybe leaves like half a yard, maybe a yard of space. He's still closing the distance. He's still stepping on his toes, quote unquote, but he's leaving some space. So this DB doesn't get hands and disrupt the timing. So many times on the goal line, wide receivers will try to attack a DB's leverage, but they get too close thinking that he's going to backpedal, and a DB will get hands and disrupt the entire timing of the route. So make sure you're not that guy, fellas. Make sure we understand this, and that's why you want to have that knowledge to win that chess match between wide receivers and DBs. Let's play this again, full speed one more time. Great job by Wilson coming out, giving that move, and then winning over the top. Okay, so now, next example here, we're going to talk about a route situation versus this coverage. So how would you guys run? And again, think about where we're at on the field. This is the 5-yard line. How would you guys run a 5-yard out? A 5-yard out versus this type of coverage. So how would you guys run a 5-yard out versus this type of coverage? You guys go ahead and pause the video and think about your answer. So pause the video. All right, let's break this thing down. So we're coming up to the line of scrimmage. We know we're in the red zone. So that means the DB is not going to do what? He is not going to backpedal. So I want you to keep that in mind here. So now, other thing is that he is what? What's our pre-snap process? We got to look at leverage, distance, coverage. So he's obviously outside leverage. The ball is to the left over here. So he's obviously outside leverage. He's maybe about 2 to 3 yards away from me, or maybe like 3 to 4 yards away from me. And he looks like he's in man, squared up stance, eyes are on me. So we know that if I have to run a 5-yard out, it's going to be very, very tough to just try to get around him and break to the 5-yard out because his sole responsibility being outside leverage is to protect the outside. Do not give up the 5-yard out. Expect the 5-yard out because this wide receiver has a reduced split. AKA he's lining up closer to the right tackle, right? He cut his split down. So that's why that DB's lined up outside shade. He's making it very tough on us. So obviously on any type of out route, like a comeback, like a 5-yard out, a 10-yard out, you got to give the quarterback space. That's why you can't just try to run around him because that DB will be right on your hip and you're cutting down the field space that we have. So if you guys said attack his inside shoulder and run full speed, then throw by, that would be incorrect because that DB ain't going to bite on that. If you come off full speed and you just run vertical, he's not going to bite. What can get him to bite is by threatening him with a slant. So if you guys said you want to close the space and give a hard fake to the inside, that would be correct. Because remember, we talked about it. A DB is not going to backpedal. So if your game plan is I'm just going to run hard and attack his inside shoulder, that would work, obviously, in the middle of the field because there's a threat of a vertical route, but not on the goal line. He's more worried about a slant or a quick in or a quick like now route than he is with like a vertical stretching fade route. So let's play this full speed and let's watch what Hawkins does here. He closes the space, gives a hard fake to the inside. And you see, it gives us room to accelerate to the outside. That's the name of the game game, fellas. Close the space. Let's threaten him. Let's make him think that we are running a slant. Let's step outside his frame, sell with the hips, sell with the shoulders. Let's get him to just hesitate for a second, so now I could get him by just a step or two, and I have room to run. If you give your quarterback room to throw you open and you give yourself room to accelerate out of the break, it is very, very tough to guard any type of outside breaking route. So if that's what you guys said, that would be correct. It might work attacking his inside shoulder hard, but you got to really make it look like a drag, like you're cutting to the inside rather than just running straight up vertical, because that DB is going to be super patient if he's been coached well on the goal line. So let's play this full speed one more time. Great job by Hawkins making that move and then giving that quarterback room outside. All right, fellas, I really want to thank you for watching. I really appreciate it. If you have any questions at all, don't hesitate to leave those in the comment section below. We always appreciate the feedback. It's always great to hear from you guys. And again, fellas, if you would like 200-plus quarterback and wide receiver drills with the exact sets and reps to do, all broken down into categories, check out that very first link in the description below. We'd love to get you on that. I'll see you guys next time.